Hi, I'm Eileen Myles. I'm a poet and a writer of various kinds, and I live in New York City and Marfa, Texas.
Hello, my name is Emily Nam. We are art people.
When I understood that the trees enabled us to be here, literally, like before there were trees created oxygen on the planet, all the growing things came first. And by the fact that they were here and they cleaned the air and produced oxygen, we could become. We couldn't get out of the water and onto the land if it weren't for the trees. It's crazy.
Eileen Myles is an influential figure engaging in their world as a poet, novelist, activist, art journalist, and a 1992 presidential candidate. They've been living in New York City since the mid-70s and now splits their time between and as a resident of the Marfa community in Texas. It is unnecessary to outlay a brief bio of Eileen's work. They have an excellent website which offers a very short, really long bio options to read, including an homage to animals. Eileen has been publishing books since 1978. Titles include Chelsea Girls, Not Me, Pathetic Literature, and The Importance of Being Iceland. They have made a formative contribution to the Poetry Project and the New York artist community at large, as well as writing about artists such as Nicole Eisenman, Carolee Schneemann, and Jack Pearson. What I have learned from my conversation with Eileen is how imperative it is to remain steadfast in our present engagement with the realities of the world, both the joys and the sufferings. Using their platform to speak towards our social climate, Eileen's participation in the world remains accountable. It has been a shock how devastating the fires in Los Angeles have been, and my sincerest wishes go out to the many families and individuals who have lost their homes, animals, and a sense of being through this unexpected whiplash, care of the natural forces of the earth. And there is an ongoing loss of life and tragedy in the Middle East that will impact generations and cultures beyond our present understanding. Many lives have been lost. In New York City, Eileen discusses, and I've linked an excellent article written by Eileen for Document Journal. Eileen Myles chronicles a people's history of East River Park, outlining the problematic excavation of an important geological history of the city. I'm grateful for the presence of Eileen and their transparency in being both an artist and a human being. Hello, Eileen. How are you today?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm having a good day.
That's good.
Yeah.
We just spoke. You're in New Hampshire. You're a resident for the McDowell residency.
Yes.
And how long are you there for?
A month.
You've done this several times, the residency?
I've done it a bunch of times. I've done it 5 times before, but I've always done it at the height of the summer, and so it's really completely different to be here in winter, and it's quite cold, and it's great. Actually, I like it. I think I might prefer it.
Yeah, it's a different type of incubator. Maybe
Yeah,
not so much wandering, but... And so you grew up in Massachusetts, you grew up in Boston,
I did.
and you have spent a large portion of your life in New York, and you're now in Marfa, Texas.
Yeah, as well, in New York too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you're still in New York. Would you consider that your home?
I have a home in New York. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at what point did you move to Marfa? Because I feel this is something that maybe a lot of people that are embedded in New York City for a very long time, in its stew of everything that it is. Did you leave because you needed space or?
Yeah. I mean, I have a small apartment that I got in my 20s that is great and well situated and tiny. So I just feel like a person. So I've spent since for a long time first when I was young and I had friends who had houses outside of the city, I would sometimes go visit them. People would let me use their houses to write, and then I started to go to residencies. And but then at a certain point, I thought, well, also I had one teaching job in California where part of the job was they would actually enable you to buy a house. And so when I left that job, I just wanted a house where I wanted a house. I thought it would be great to have my own residency, which I did in 2015. I was in Marfa at a residency, and I really liked the place and found a house and bought it.
Marfa's an interesting place because in a way it's very rural and absent of much, but then it's also got this very potent contemporary art world, Donald Judd.
Yeah, there's a community there of all kinds. I mean, there's musicians and artists and writers, and so there's enough. For me, I mean, I very much decided to live there because I saw that I was single at the time, and I thought I wouldn't die of loneliness here, and yet there's plenty of space, and so that seemed kind of perfect.
So community was important for you. It wasn't so much for isolation to work. It's also about,
I wanted both.
yeah.
I mean, because I think if you live alone in a house by yourself, it could get kind of nuts.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I needed to do that someplace where I could find people.
Mm-hmm. That's nice. I was reading an article you wrote for Document about the East River and the history of the trees, which
Yeah.
I found that such a profound piece of writing. I myself have seen and I've walked by and see all those big machines that they've been using and cutting down the trees and just developing that area. So I've been aware of it, but I never fully understood the potency of what it meant for New York City. And so I really appreciated how you wrote about it.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm without going into detail. I'm working on it right now because I
Mm-hmm.
want to have something. I'm working on a novel, but I want to have something of that in there because I want to make that story permanent.
Yeah, I think it's a very important. I mean, there were many things you were talking about the importance of the trees, and something also that you mentioned was you talked about being immersed in the city and moving your body around the grid and touching things. And I wanted to ask you about that idea of touching things as an experience that then informs you about, say, where you are in New York or just in your life, moving around and absorbing culture.
Hmm. Um, Maybe I think I know what you mean, but you're talking about uh, again because I don't know exactly what I wrote, but some physical relation to the city. Are you saying you know?
Yeah, well, I think New York, well, I think about a goat track. So I have my own goat tracks in New York City where I'm sort of habitually walking around a certain place or an area and
Oh, yeah, yeah,
I'm part of it and I gain things from it, but I'm not really aware of what it is. It's like not an intuition, but it's I'm absorbing something about the city and it's informing and educating me. And so
yeah.
maybe you have some goat tracks in that you've had in New York that you sort of follow and
Well, I think I know in relationship to where I live in New York, what is 10 minutes away, what is 15 minutes away, what is a half hour away, what is 45 minutes away, what is what I would do if I wanted to spend 2 or 3 hours. So there's that kind of, and also I'm a dog person. So like that park was down there forever, and I've been a runner for most of my life, and so I would always go down there to run along the river. That was kind of my primary relationship to it, and then bringing dogs down there. But then in 2014, I got a new dog, which is the dog I have now, Honey, and she just had so much energy, and
she's a pit bull, isn't
yeah.
she?
And
Yeah.
so I just perpetually would walk down to that park with her, and it was. I mean, she was incredible. We would go on a 2 hour walk, and then she would look at me like, "Okay, let's go on a walk." Oh my God. But it made the park just became even more a part of my neighborhood and my intimate place. And then I didn't know about the park being destroyed until, I mean, it was well on it hadn't begun, but it was like I think 2020, the pandemic was when I learned that this had happened. Um, and was going to happen. And then I started to get involved, and that was really important for me. I became, I when I reached out and I found out who was doing activism around it, and became part of that group. And then from that group, found other people, and then we started our own group, and really, and it was great to have these skills as an artist, and to have these tools, these publicity tools, both social media and just lists, email lists, all the ways that we communicate with people, and even having a certain level of prominence meant that I was a really good. I could do activism very easily, and so that was really exciting to have it be that the prominence that I gained as a writer had more applications than just to become more prominent, and that for me was really great and is great that you get to use your reputation in these other ways.
I wanted to speak with you about that because I feel you're very involved, and um, I thought about this idea of thinking hard and paying attention and being present in the world, because I think it's very easy to just float off. And I mean, you could even go, oh, I've done all of this, I can disappear in a way and live my life. But you're very present, engaged, clearly culturally educated on the state of the world. And you do speak out about a lot of difficult things that we have to face, and that also gets like diluted in the media. And so how you've been able to use writing and poetry as a way to keep us present and like on that tension of not forgetting,
Mm-hmm.
because I think it's very easy to forget.
And yet I think, why? How? I mean, it's so crazy. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
if it's important in your life to know, I mean, like Palestine, it's sort of like it's important to know today that people are being murdered. How could I get up in front of an audience doing a poetry reading and forget to mention that? You know, um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, though, having said that, I think maybe I did do one reading where it just didn't cross my mind, and that I find that disturbing. But I'm like, you know, I'm a flawed being, but largely I just feel like if it's on the front of my mind, then it's got to be at the front of the microphone. You know, how is it possible that we live in a time where a genocide is taking place?
And then we're not talking about it. I really appreciate how present you are and how much you speak, because I also think sometimes it can be, even in this sort of strange art world, that speaking out and having opinions can sometimes seem damaging, or people want to hold their reputation. So there's just so many complicated reasons, and so you
Yeah.
hold it and you just stand in your own presence, and I think that's very empowering for many people around you. And yeah,
Well, thank you.
I just wanted to reflect on that. And do you, because you do write as well, not just poetry, so do you seek out opportunities to write about other issues, so the East River Park and
I did with the park. I did Palestine. I haven't so much. I mean, it's more like if anybody asks me to write about anything, I'll write about Palestine. I will get it in there somehow. So that's the nature of my commitment at this moment. But with the park, I felt like, I mean, it was a great awakening because I thought I had so much access in a certain way that, when I first came aboard with this activist group, I thought, well, I can write a editorial for the New York Times. I can, I thought and I couldn't. They would not let me write about it.
wow.
They wouldn't touch
Yeah.
it. And I heard so many different explanations, including that the New York Times, as most media in New York, are intimately involved with real estate. And so the political interests, both, within the city government and within the real estate lobby, can control the New York Times. So the New York Times is not going to, because they would talk about similar things all over the country, but not in New York. And then also the New York Times had gotten rid of the metro section. Like there was no part of the paper that talked about New York City anymore. And that's happening across, like the New Yorker for me, the New Yorker's value used to be that, there were listings at the front and all the theater and the music and everything. And it's like shrunk down because it's not anything that says New York is not for New Yorkers anymore. And so we're kind of being robbed of a present and a place. It's very weird.
Mm.
It's
How
sort of
has New York changed for you? Because you came in the early 70s,
mid
really
'70s,
mid 70s, out of college. And
pretty much. Yeah, I had done a little bit of traveling, but I needed a life and a way to be and a place to be, and New York just instantly clicked. I mean, I think I always knew because I lived, Boston is quite close to New York, but that's like saying that Brooklyn, not now, but maybe 40 years ago, is quite close to New York. It's still, we all know Saturday Night Fever. It's sort of like one can be just, it's class.
Mm.
And so Boston, though it was 250 miles away from New York, was just another universe. And so I feel like by coming there, I found my home.
And did you feel that New York has shaped you as a poet? Like, were you a poet before you came to New York, or did you know internally?
Yeah, no, I came to New York specifically, intentionally to be a poet. I that's what I wanted to do with my life, and I knew that it wasn't happening in Boston. And I was already writing poems. Some of them were good, I think, but I just didn't have any. I didn't have a complicated aesthetic. I didn't know. I had very obvious ideas about what to read and what writing was and what a writer's life was. And so New York was, so many kinds of education.
You've talked a lot about the poetry project, and you were really immersed in that, both as a, let's say, student and facilitator of the space. Was it important to see those people around you and have examples of how to be a poet?
Well, it's like anything else. Yeah, it's sort of like you really need to with anything. If you wanted to be a plumber, you would have to meet a plumber.
Mm.
You wouldn't invent it. And so I think I had enough of an education on the history of poetry to know that, and I had seen one or two poets. And more than that. I mean, in college there were two poets who came, and then I started to go to a few readings in Boston before I left. But none of that prepared me for the kind of barrage of you know years of going to readings and understanding the culture of poetry and socializing with poets and the economic condition of poets and the the position of poets in culture and so on.
I think poetry is a very brave. I think being an artist is brave, but I also think poetry is this next level of bravery.
Well, I think poetry and dance might have the hardest time being economically viable,
Mm.
except that I also throw that out because I think anything that you do, I think just with all of you and passionately, and I think, and I obviously if you have to be kind of good, at it. But it's just like ultimately I think it will support you. I think it's like, you build your nest out of what you care about. And I think
Mhm.
I just decided to believe that when I was young, that it was going to take care of me. And it has, you know. And so I think that people have to think more radically about, what to do with their lives. You know.
And I think making the commitment. So you clearly made the commitment, I'm going to be a poet, and not being afraid of that
Yeah, and
and
not
not letting uncertainty in.
and then uncertainty is part of the path and like welcoming it
Sure.
too.
Yeah.
So it's just like, and for me, I think I think a lot of poets, there was a sense that you had to be living a middle class life at a certain point in time, or that, yeah, that it was threatening to that, and I feel like I was very happy to work mundane jobs when I was young because I thought I don't want to get professionally involved in something else that will then make it be that I've got to like aspire in that place rather than, even getting an MFA. I wasn't going to get an advanced degree. I thought, well, they will want me to teach when I've published enough books. So again, I was lucky. I threw some ideas out and followed them, and I was lucky that they worked.
Have you been surprised by what poetry has allowed you to do? I think maybe there's the writing and then performance, but you've been in film and you've made short movies and
Well, it seems like it's everything. It's sort of like everything I'm interested in, everything I ever made, it's sort of like what I'm made of, my gender, my sexuality. It's sort of like you don't. I mean, it's so interesting. I think, especially the more public you become like an attractor, and I mean, I first learned that when I ran for president in the 90s. You just put something out and you find out who likes that idea. And they bring you things, and those things become your road, I think.
And so you're not so much, it's not just dependent on you, it's dependent on the community and the people that you're stumbling with along the way.
Yeah, and I think being willing to be visible, and not being ashamed of, I mean, obviously, I come from a working class Catholic background. I'm bred to be ashamed of what I want, so I'm certainly not, you know, um, without problems in that area. But in large ways, I'm glad to say what it is that I want and see what I get back.
Do you think that was from your family or something ingrained in you as a person? Because your writing is incredibly vulnerable.
So is what from my family? Which part of the question?
Oh, sorry. The assurance of self or commitment to believe in yourself.
I don't know. Not really. I mean, like my parents were unsure. They were disappointed. They were beautiful and they were smart and they had many wonderful things about themselves. But I think they did not know how to build a life. They very much settled for the lives that were given them. And so I mean, but I think that they were very clear about that. You know what I mean? Like they had greater aspirations that they then didn't have any idea how to express. So I think that there was a certain goad in their very existence that really affected me. Because I didn't. I mean, in some ways they were a negative example. I didn't want to be like that. But on the other hand, my mother read to us. She was a great reader. She was it's so weird because it's something I thought of lately, like because people of certain class, like if you're from an acting family or a political family, it seems like the door is just open in a certain way. And I thought that just wasn't true for people of other classes. But it is too, in a way, because I feel like I make my living to a very large extent doing readings. And my mother loved to read, was a great reader. I mean, both like books and aloud. She loved to read out loud. Her voice is one of the most intense things I knew about her. And so she gave me that. It was just,
That's amazing.
yeah. And I think my dad was a mailman and he brought home every publication there was. Our house was filled with magazines, and I love, I love journalism. I love information. It just like, so that, it was just kind of, they love music. What they loved was the message, I think.
Did you, because I think you reading is a very powerful part of your work, and I wanted to talk to you about performance. Because I think your performance and the way you read your poetry is just as powerful as the poetry itself. And was that something you expected?
Well, I think they're the same thing. I don't think they're like,
Yeah.
I think that so much of writing for me is listening. You're kind of, in a way, you're kind of a scribe for this voice in your head. So I feel like my job is to be the best delivery of what I hear, and so that you could call that performance. But I think for me, I think the performance is the writing. That's the perform because it's so interesting that I've when I've written something and for some reason or another computers are hell, right? You can lose several pages of writing because your computer freezes and you can't figure out how to get. And so then I would think, well, just go write it again right away. And it would be similar, but it would be different. It would just like each moment creates a whole different text, and if you go back, you don't go back ever to it's just like, it's like Paul Virilio. The world is moving, in us and through us. And so the text changes. So I feel, for me, I think that the writing is the performance. There's nothing I hate more than being called spoken word or a performance poet. It just feels very patronizing. And it sort of suggests that there's this world of the page and then there's this world of the stage. And these are separate worlds. And I find that kind of stupid, actually, you know.
You've somehow been able to remove yourself from these associations and just be you and not be boxed into a, like, as you've just said, poet, or it's like you are the person, you are the artist creating work, and whatever that is, it's an expression of you. And I think, was that hard to do, or is that just who you are?
I think it's just something that grew, and the way it you know. 'Cause, I mean, it's a very funny. I think there is a quality where it's weird because I'm not, like I'm not. What I'm gonna say, I don't know what I'm gonna say. I'm not. All I know is that I'm aware of my commodity, and it's a very funny one. Like I had a show of photographs at a gallery a few years ago. Bridget Donahue was a wonderful gallery, and they were my Instagram photographs. And she said that no artist had brought in I had brought in the biggest audience of foot traffic to that show of any show she had ever had, right?
Wow.
And then I think, and also press, which I find hard to believe that I got the most reviews. I don't know how that could be true. But I only sold like 5 photographs. And she said that it didn't make sense. And I just think it's sort of like there was some weird thing that I do that people want. And so, I mean, like, it's just like my books sell okay. My books sell fine, but my readings are packed. And that's really funny, and so that's somehow the thing I've created. So I think it's weird. I think, things will go better when I'm dead for my books. I think I'm the problem, but also I'm, like luckily
You're the product as well.
Yeah. So I gain from it. It's my life is fine, but it's really funny. I don't get, big book awards. There's some weird way that I'm a professional Eileen. That's my deal.
It's in a way like you were just talking about your mother and her speaking, and it's being in your presence, and the voice maybe as a channeling, and I think I'm really interested in sound as this unit that impacts us in a way that we're not fully aware of.
Mm-hmm.
And so your voice is sending out these sound waves and embouchure that is hitting people, and maybe they're receiving.
Embouchure?
Yeah,
I love that word. We're right in the same. I mean, that is so interesting to me, that word. When I first heard about it, I was like, yes.
It's a nice word, isn't it?
Yeah.
I just think how you're passing that information to others, and that's it's the same as like reading something. I can't read on a screen. I have to have a book, and so it's hard to digest that information, and so maybe people digest your information the most in its true essence by spoken word.
Yeah, it might be true. Yeah.
Just a thought.
I do feel like I'm the best medium of the work. I do believe that. But I think, but I love books and I mean what is there,
Do you read a lot?
Oh yeah.
You're like other, yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's almost a problem. Like I want to read all the time. It's kind of like I have to stop reading to write, and it's a little bit difficult. Like right now I'm reading the 3rd volume of the 3-Body Problem. Did you read that series?
No, I haven't.
It's kind of amazing, and that's what's so weird about it. It's like I'm reading that, and I watched all of X-Files. Like I never when it was new or when it was happening, I had friends who were addicted to it, but I wasn't. I would watch an episode with them, but I never, so I didn't have the Scully and Mulder thing. And I think last spring somebody who was doing a residency in Marfa just said, I'm watching all of X-Files. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And so, I just finished it last night. And it's so funny because I feel like something we were saying earlier about the world that we're in, and that these horrendous things can be happening and people could feel like we don't have to mention it. It's sort of like, and then, what I've been consuming as books and video is a world in which it's the outcome of that, I think. It's
Mm-hmm.
sort of like the forces are so, it's sort of like the world is just being consumed by its own vulnerability, its own incapacity to be present. And of course, government, whatever government is, both national and, you know, in the galaxy, galactic government, it's just really, but a failure of human beings to do something well, and to make that be the important thing.
Yeah, and I think it's not necessarily a choice, as you was just talking about. You consumed in all these other things, but you also want to pay attention to. It takes a lot of effort and presence to pull yourself into choosing what you want to pay attention to.
Right. Because now and harder than ever now, we are just pulled in so many directions. It's so
Mm, mm.
intense.
I just want to go back to the sound-ish idea because I was wanting to ask you about onomatopoeia, and I feel like you make and write a lot of sounds like hispoing, or you make when you're speaking and presenting words, you describe sound with word. Is that something that you're interested in?
Well, it's kind of pop, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think. I mean, I was educated. I love comic books and,
Mm-hmm.
and very and vernacular, and it just vernacular is full of onomatopoeia. It's sort of like it's the language of it's visual. It's visual language, I guess. Though we know it's sound, but it's how sound is presented visually.
Mm-hmm.
Often. Um,
Do you think about language as visual, or how do you organize words on a page as a visual
yeah,
idea, or
yeah.
yeah?
I mean, it's sort of like there's the soundtrack, but when it hits the page, it's a visual thing for sure. Like
And then it becomes sound when you're reading it.
exactly. And when I read it, I have no. I mean, to some extent, sometimes passages of absence on the page mean silence. That's but line breaks don't mean stop here. And
Mm-hmm.
um,
And when you're reading, I guess you've come through from your mind has got the thought and it's come to paper, so you've already heard it in its rhythm and
yeah,
tension.
yes, but I have to say the thing that I mean, my favorite thing in the world is when I've got a new poem or a new passage of a book, and I've never read it out loud before, and the first time I hear it, for me, I think it's such an intimacy with an audience because I feel like it's me re-experiencing the experience of writing with them. So I think it's
Mm-hmm.
a collective writing that's the truest way I feel like about readings. And it's tricky because sometimes you can think that you want to read something or you can think that you should read something and then you're reading it in front of people and it's not happening, it's not alive. And it's really a bad feeling, because for that moment for me to be just open and really connecting wildly feels like the most exciting thing.
Do you have a ritual in any way of how you do present your work or speak to the public? Because has there been a moment where you've not felt connected? Or is there a way to bring yourself into connection with the audience?
No, I mean, I was scared when I was young. I didn't know that you should be paying more attention to yourself than to them. And I can get anxious and forget that in some way, or I feel like I don't like reading without a microphone because I feel like I'm just used to the physical focus of having something in front of me, and so I read
Mm-hmm.
to that. And then other than that, I feel like I'm just using my body or my voice to get the text out the way I hear it. And if that's not there, I feel like I'm just there with my body, and I find it uncomfortable. There's no focus, and sometimes there are situations where I can hear myself being loud or trying to sell the text or putting more behind it than I feel like the less I do, the better, and that's why I love microphones because you can really, it's really like being read to,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just like, yeah, I say you really, it's like, I think you really almost need to forget, even though they're there, you need to forget that people are there, and just have this incredible experience with yourself, for them. There's something very exhibitionistic about it, I suppose, because it's like being alone in public.
And being vulnerable in public,
Yeah,
sharing.
being ugly. It's just like
Yeah.
that's something when I was younger. I just didn't want to look weird. I wanted to look good, and I feel like aging has enabled me to understand. It's like the embouchure thing, or is it embouchure or embouchure? There's no R.
Might have a different pronunciation of.
I mean, the first time like I said, I was early on. I worked with, like I just worked at a bar and a restaurant where there were jazz musicians, and I would just watch them, and they all had all these. The bass player would be like doing these things with his mouth, and the piano player would be growling, and everybody had
Mm-hmm.
very funny body language, which I think is
Yeah.
and it's just like I slowly gave myself permission to have that and to do that, and all I'm doing is emitting or producing a poem, but I have to get it out the right way, and it's in all these body parts, and it's at a certain pace, and I have to move or be however it is that produces that sound.
Yeah, and it is a body movement. I think I was just looking at recently that idea of musicians have to enter this state of, and also be comfortable with it, just being completely free of how they look, because they can look ridiculous when they're performing, and
Yeah,
it can be criticized by a public, and so they have to really let go and just be vulnerable, and
right, right.
to allow that channeling or whatever it is to play that music. And yeah, I really like that idea of getting it out of the body parts, because it probably is stuck in there. And
Yeah, and you can't make the same solution as you did last time necessarily. You just can't in the same way that you think people are going to laugh here and then they don't. So you can't
Mhm.
do the same performance twice in a way, and then you kind of do.
Without, yeah, because it's, if you're in that essence of who you are, it's in flow and probably works for you in the way that you want it to work
Mhm.
without trying. When you're writing, I was wondering, because you are having thoughts, but you've also just got the mind thoughts and the mental human thoughts happening at the same time. And so how do you separate the words for being on a page or a paper and just the human mess?
I'm not sure I
Or is
understand
that
the
what you
question.
use? We'll say mental activity, just thoughts, um, cycling thoughts, just being a human being and going through with our own
Right,
dialogue in our mind,
right.
but then also needing to write from that same place.
There's editing,
Hmm.
because I think that, I really do believe in the flow of, like it's sort of like you can kind of be writing and it be sort of garbled, and suddenly you hit the thing and then you're sailing, and then you lose it, and then you're like stumbling, and stuff. And I think, editing is the moment where you get to keep keep the sailing, and then, create transitional moments and stuff. I feel that less in poetry and more in prose, because I think there's long passages of movement in prose, whereas poetry, it seems like there's a movement, and that's the poem. But with the prose, I think you go in and out of it a bit.
Is there a process that you go through with working? Do you have to be isolated, or is it just, does it come at any moment?
Well, I'm not able to write at any moment because of where I might be or something. So it's important to take notes and not lose things. But I notice increasingly my notes are not much help. It's sort of like, because it seems like you got to get the stuff behind it. The context isn't there. Um, so I mean, I guess, like this is, being here, like where I am. This is great. I hang out and I wake up. I hang out and read. and then I sometimes I have to get a little exercise first, or and or meditate first. But other days I feel like I'm ready and I'll do that stuff later, you know. So it's just kind of like when I feel like I'm able to write, you know. But it's like in the situation like this, that's what I'm here for. So every day I will get to it, and I must get to it. Um, so the situation's really conducive, and it's you know, I don't have to walk my dog. I don't have any house issues, any things to take care of. So it's really, I mean, these residencies are incredible because you're just cared for. You know, you're like somebody with a family or a wife. You know, it's sort of like, you
And you can just focus on the craft.
know.
You meditate? So do you have a spiritual practice or a religious practice that supports you?
Yeah, meditation is that for sure because I feel like clearing my mind. And I do, you know, it's sort of like I do believe, I mean, without going deeply into it, because I don't have a, you know, a religion or a God per se, but I do believe in prayer, you know, I do. And so I have some rituals around that I do in relationship to performance and increasingly when I remember in relationship to writing, like I thought, why is it that I would always pray before I read, but I wouldn't before I write, you know, and I realized that's really important. If I really believe what I just said, that it's a performance, then why am I not? Why this is actually more important than that, you know?
You're talking about, and you actually moved your arms around like the world was turning.
Yeah.
And I was watching the sunset the other night and I had to remind myself that the sun's not moving and going down, that we're actually the ones moving.
I guess the sun is moving too, though, isn't it?
Sure, yeah, I guess it is. But it was just that concept of we're here, we're static, and it's not that we are rotating, and so I wonder what your thoughts are about the universe and being here on Earth and being a human and this whole bigger picture. Is that something you think about?
I mean, yeah, though I'm not sure. I think I have any thoughts at the top of my mind about that. You know, like I think I am somehow very aware of that turning. I think, which is light and the planet and our. I mean, I guess I love you know astronomy and stars and planets and you know a galactic view. I mean, that's why I go to science fiction because I like to be in that scale. You know, because it's amazing that we're just on this ball of dirt that's turning around us, you know, and that it's every way that light changes during the day. It's just like it's this giant star that we're completely, you know, protected by and formed by. Like we read these things with such subtlety, but all it is something kind of geometric that's happening. You know, that people read as emotional, and you know, I mean, I think I remember a poet, Brian Tier, um, in a book of his, he said something. He was talking about lyric, and he said something to the effect that it's like it just means bend. You know, in the same way that as you move towards the, you know, light is changing as the Earth moves, and as the, you know, the light bends, the planet bend. You know, and it's sort of like, and even you know, you think about music, and somebody bends a note, and it's sort of like that's what lyric means. You know, it's like this tension that goes, you know, and I think it's sort of, you know, it's just a meaning that is always to me so exciting and great and so beautiful because it's sort of like to me it's like the relationship between poetry and the astral, you know, and they're just completely connected.
Yeah, I think uh my I'm not, I don't feel I can talk about poetry because I'm not, it's not something I'm fully aware of, but my experience of poetry is that all the detritus has been removed and it's just this pure connection,
Mm-hmm.
and there's space between the words, and it's something that I don't understand, and I think it's the same thing. Yeah, looking at the stars, there's that, it's clear, and raw, and I think that's a really lovely connection that you've made. I also think something that's interesting, just talking about words and poetry being connected, something that I'm thinking about is how the sun and the planets, we're all just stuck in this same orbit,
Mm-hmm.
and we're connected in this way that's not physical, but it is, there is this magnetism between something.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just after you talking about that tension, there is this magnetism between words and poetry that holds it together in some miraculous way.
Well, it's so funny because poetry is math. And it just, for some reason, it's so funny. I've heard people say that twice in the past couple of days, and I feel so heartened by it because I feel like that there is just this this counting and this squeezing and this tension of the spatialness, that has to do with time and thoughts and the order you put them in. It's just like I really think that that's why these things are related, because they really are mathematical. It's sort of like it's like I think I don't some people work from the in the same way that there are jazz pianists and there are people who work with sheet music and they do composition and then they but but I think same with poetry. Some people are writing in meters and they're counting and they're making sure the form. But even those people, they know those forms so well that they're almost improvising. Whereas there are those of us who don't use receive forms, but we're improvising, but we're counting. Not consciously, but it's like I know when it's got enough words, and that's syllabic. And even um, according to vowels and you know consonants and etc. It's sort of like it's the blockiness of the language.
I was thinking about the composition of words, and the word is your unit or tool in a way. And do you have a tension where you're like a restlessness when you're writing, that you're trying to find something and it's sort of there, but you really have to fight for it? Or is it something that's quite an ease, even though you're working and producing the work, it comes with an ease? And like, how do you
Both,
approach?
both, because I feel like there's the writing, and I kind of know what realm I'm in and sort of what I'm purportedly writing about. But I know that I'm looking for something else and that I don't know what it is. And so it's sort of like, and that often produces digressions and distractions and things like that. And those are really fun and exciting. So it's just like the two things are going on. I've got to be writing about something, but then I'm happy and surprised by the things that come out along the way.
And a lot of your writing is personal narrative. You've just said you have to write about something. Is it something that has to be real for you in your life, or can it be imagined? How does that interplay with each other?
Yeah, I mean, in the same way that we make jokes and make up ludicrous situations about real things, and suddenly we're constructing another world in some way. I mean, there's actually more fantasy and sci-fi in my writing than it appears. You know what I mean? Like I think that there's a lot of made up shit, not just in terms of people's lives, but also pure fantasy. Like I go there a lot, I think.
Is sci-fi your thing? I didn't realize this.
I mean, it's kind of. I mean, I'm very aware of it today, but I think it's kind of where I come from. When I was a kid, I wanted to be an astronaut. That was my plan. And I read a lot of sci-fi, and I think sci-fi was my introduction. I mean, there's a lot of people. Sci-fi and Twilight Zone were my introductions to kind of the avant-garde and experimental writing and poetry. Because they're weird. They're not. They're not conventional. And before there was unconventional forms of literature or art, there was sci-fi and fantasy and weird stuff. So I think I'm not alone in being somebody who came from there. You know, and it was so funny. Even watching X Files, there was an episode in which it was like there was an alternative universe thing, and so Mulder was talking about the first ever episode of Twilight Zone, and that somehow or other he was looking for it, and suddenly it didn't exist, and it was like it existed in one world, but it didn't exist in another. And then Scully came along, and she said, "Well, you sure it wasn't Outer Limits?" Which I don't know if you've ever heard of this show, but
No.
it was the other show that came up in the '60s. And he was like, "No, it was Twilight Zone. It was not Outer Limits." And it was so funny because I thought it was just written by somebody who was on that road, that we would all know, and there were other shows that were even less good, but we all watched them because that's what there was.
It's funny you've brought up that, because I used to watch X-Files, but I thought if I want to do a real binge of a series, that X-Files is what I'd go in from the start and just watch the whole thing. But I'm a bit afraid, I think, because when you're watching those series, it does consume you, and I kind of lose myself in life.
Well, I was very methodical. I would just watch one a day.
Oh, that's disciplined.
Because it isn't actually, it's conducive. X-Files is conducive because it's mostly episodic.
Uh-huh.
They only once in a while there's like to be continued.
Oh,
but
yeah.
very rarely. So you really get a whole, and you have to get into a whole other fantasy world if you're going to watch another one. So I will say yesterday I watched 3 because I knew that I was ending it, and now there remains 2 films. There are 2 X-File films. One from but I feel like I think before I leave this place this month, I'm going to do that.
Do you write in an episodic way? Everything's very contained, or is it linear? I know it has been linear in some ways, but particularly in writing a short piece, it's contained in itself.
Well, I kind of know what I want. I usually have an idea. There's the difference between somebody commissioning something. I can't think of the last thing. It was somebody. There was a British book, Pissing Women, and it was a book of photographs of women pissing in public. That was just, so they asked me if I would write for that, and I did. And I don't know that. I think I might have had some idea, but I knew that I was gonna generally talk about the category of pissing, and my own pissing experience. It's just like I didn't know if that was what they expected of me, but that's what I was going to do, and that was fun to write. But again, there were a few surprises and flourishes. So I guess I generally, like what I'm working on now, I know what the narrative is of East River Park, but I'm trying to reframe it in some way so that it really fits in a novel. And then I guess I can't talk about it too much because I'm doing it. So I don't.
Yeah. Something that you wrote in that East River piece was about the 80-year-old trees. And that, I think, is what really shifted my perspective of how important the parks are. Because even if they planted a tree now it's going to take 80 years for it to be what it is. And I don't think we appreciate what that means. And it kind of hit me in a way of, oh, that's why this New York is so important. And
well, a person in our group, I think her name was Catherine de la Cruz, a young woman in her 20s, I think. At one of our events, she said the absolute best thing, which was, she goes, "How do we know there will be any more 80-year-old trees?" And I was like, oh my God. Only somebody in their 20s could ask such a question. It wouldn't even occur to me that the world could not produce any more 80-year-old trees. But she lives in a different world than I do. And she knows how.
It was frightening. Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy. So literally, it's like there are old people who were in that park. They were walking the last walks of their life. And that could be any one of us, of course. But it's like, but somebody say in their 80s, it's like probably true. And you take that park away, and you've taken away their last walks. It's insane what it is and what it means. And so it's so funny. It's half gone now, and which I have to keep remembering. Half of it is still there, and there's even a question of what they're going to do. They're probably going to do what they intend to do, which is demolish it all. But but they did remove pretty much the oldest part of the park already. I mean, that was crazy, and it was elevated. It did not need to go. Did not need to go. It was, except you just want to have it all be yours. It's really crazy.
It made me think a lot about being in New York and the people that make up New York. And I think New York, you have a better understanding of this, has changed significantly. And even my experience of, I hear all these stories of artists that were in community and had this really great, nourishing dialogue. And then now it's this very digital dialogue that is interspersed with community spaces. And so I think about the importance of having mentorship and the elders of New York and the creative community remaining and being present as a sort of beacon of like a reminder how to be in a way. And what's mentorship? How does mentorship now play for you at a different age?
Well, I object to all of it. I mean, it's funny. I gotta say, I sort of I don't like, I don't like elders. I don't like mentorship. I mean, I feel like what I do feel about the world that we live in, and I've, seen it very dramatically since, I guess, the 90s or the aughts was I mean, because of real estate, because of graduate programs, because of art institutions and mentorship programs, and this kind of there's a categorization of generations. Like when I came to New York, and I think it was again because of real estate, because of the lack of graduate programs. Lots of people had big lofts, and they would have parties, and everybody would come. And so I was always at parties with old people and young people, and I just didn't think about it except that you knew that older people had lofts and they had been here longer and stuff, and they would open these places to you. And so I had lots of older friends when I was young, but they were my friends. I didn't invite them to be in a professionalized relationship with me and called it mentorship. You know what I mean? Like if I said to an older poet, I want you to mentor me, they would be, get the fuck out of here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They were, and so there was a kind of a very freestyling intimacy. And so it's true. I mean, I'm 70. I had a birthday party in Marfa recently. I'm 75 years old. But when somebody refers to me as an elder, I feel like it's not that I deny my age, but I'm in some other category. I think the things that I like the most are disparate, and are not, so that's, I mean, it's sort of like, if I can address what I imagine you were saying, the importance of us having a friendship, of knowing me, who is probably, I don't know, are you in your 30s?
40s.
40s.
I've just turned 40 this year.
Yeah, so I'm 30 years older than you. So it's sort of like I gain my friends who are in their 80s are important to me, and my friends are in their 50s. But I really need the people in their 70s because we just mirror each other, and we don't have to. There's so much we don't have to explain, And I realized there's a way in which, especially because I spent a lot of my life dating people younger than me, and so even last night it was just like there was. At the dinner here, I felt like, are we flirting, me and this woman? And it was funny that I could feel my body change. I didn't like it. It was just like because I had my sense, I had other, like both, I think both the women I was talking to were probably the same age, and I was a different age. And even though it was this positive feeling, I also felt like there was this negative feeling because I felt other and separate by my apprehension of it being this other relationship and possibly, and who I was in that exchange, I'm not even sure where that's going.
No, I really like that idea. I think that I felt at a younger age that I had to be friends with people my age, and I've opened that up. Friendships of all ages, and I really appreciate that. And so I was probably talking about referring to these 80-year-old trees as just being a presence and
Yeah.
not so much the organizational mentorship, but just having community. And I would love it if New York became a bit more of that loft sort of style of everyone. But it does feel so segmented now, and
Yeah. Yeah.
there's less fluid engagement of just meeting people and talking to people. And I have some, not to refer to age, but older artist friends that I love just going out and hanging out with, and because they're people and they're have so many wonderful, they have much more interesting stories because they've had more, and
And they have a different relationship to the world.
yeah, different relationship, different experience. But then I also are valuable to them because I bring in my own relationship and opinion.
Oh
And
yeah.
I think it's really vital for communities to keep that.
You've got to have that diversity of generations, or there's just no
Mm,
exchange. And it's also a decision that you don't have anything I need, and everything I need
mm,
is I can get from my generation, whether they're older or younger. And it's just not true. Like what you said, it's not true. And the tree, I mean, to address the trees, it's like when I understood that the trees enabled us to be here, literally. Like before there were trees created oxygen
mm.
on the planet. All the growing things came first. And by the fact that they were here and they cleaned the air and produced oxygen, we could become. We couldn't get out of the water and onto the land if it weren't for the trees. It's crazy. And it's sort of like, and the old trees have so much more, like there were people in my group of, and I would say that part of the thing I loved about activism is that we were all ages. Like when I first started, the group that was doing it were old. And I said, by old, I mean my age, and I was like, well, I'm hanging, and they were straight. So I felt like they all seemed older to me. They had old white pigtails and I was wheat pasting with these women, and but slowly our group, there started to be more younger people, and actually the younger people started to create their own group, and I kind of went with them. But the diversity of ages in our project and our desire was what was really moving and really important about what we were doing and how we were doing it. Like that we needed each other, because we had all these different skills, and that was so important, you know.
Yeah, and learning from each other, and also just I don't think it's an age, like a human experience can affect anyone. And so you and I may have both had a human experience that was similar at a different point in time, but it
Mhm.
happened in our life at um, we both went through it in our life at a certain stage. And so there's that relationship that I guess makes human connection this circular kind of thing, because we all seem to stumble onto it. So I just wanted to talk and ask you about poetry as this tool to navigate life, and in a way it's anchored you, I think, as a creative process of understanding the world around you, and how poetry's held this place for you to grow. And I'm wondering how that has been in your life. Is poetry your blood and your air kind of thing? Does that make sense?
It's my tool. I feel like as a younger person trying to figure out what I was going to do and how I was going to do it, when I concluded that I wanted to be a poet, then I had an organizing tool, like of how to make choices and to go this way, not that way, and so it's sort of like it's all the things it is, within a daily life and the practice of it. It's also that same thing in the reality of my life, sort of a measure in a way, you know.
And do you think the topics or what you choose to write about has changed? Say when you're in your 20s, you're probably in a different level of discovery to what your interests are now of the world.
I was more oppressed by my family in the past. You know what I mean? I was trying to sort out how I was separate from that. And I think the way through that was through that. And so there was a lot. I mean, I still have new thoughts about my family and my connection to them today. But it was really, really in the front of my attention when I came to New York, even.
Do you think in some ways it's this way a tool to process grief of life? Not specifically your life, but we're using this as a tool to process our grief of being human and
Yeah, yeah, and also our exhilaration about it, and then the kind of amazingness of the world. It's inventory. You know.
and is there any way that you hope or would ideally haven't done yet but would like to present your work? Is there a way that your work could be received? I know you've recently you did the trip, which I thought was such a beautiful philosophical film about the world, and I thought that was a really interesting way to bring in. It was very you at the same time, and
Mhm.
I thought that was interesting that you went into that medium in that way. It kind of reminds me. I really appreciate Chantal Ackerman's News from Home,
Uh huh. Yeah.
and it made me think about that.
Ha ha. Oh, that's great. Yeah, I mean, there's another short, maybe a little longer film that I would like to do. That it's not like that, but the same filmmaker and I would do it together, and that would be fun. But also, I've written a screenplay for Chelsea Girls, and it was almost produced, and then not. And so I would like in my lifetime for somebody to make that film. You know, and it's just people. It's funny. People keep coming to me and wanting to do it, and then nothing happened. You know what I mean? Like they get really excited and they want to see the screenplay, and then I don't hear anything. And so also I've written a pilot for a TV show. I mean, it's
Wow.
funny because which I really would love to see produced. And but I just decided that I was that because that world is so frustrating. You do something, you make something, and there's no guarantee that anything will happen.
Hmm.
So I'm much more, if I write a novel, it'll get published.
And you have more autonomy over that output.
Yeah. So I feel like I need to finish that. I need to do that first.
And you like voicing over the you do Audible, so you prefer to do the voiceover for your books?
Yeah. Though weirdly, the last two books, for now, and my new book poetry haven't been. Nobody wanted to make the audiobook. It's like a company has to. I mean, Audible is where they go, but a company, does the recording and finances it, and no bought those books, which is
Oh wow.
so disappointing. I mean, for me,
Mm.
it's kind of my favorite thing, you know, because there's so much fun in going into a studio and reading your whole book. And that particular relationship, with the sound engineer is really fun too.
And do you read it in sections or you just go a full?
They pretty much stagger it. They say, okay, let's go for an hour or 15 minutes or whatever, and they
Hmm.
decide how much we'll do in a day, and it's usually
Hmm.
3 days.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
So the last question I like to ask is, what do you celebrate?
What do I celebrate? Oh, I mean anything and everything. It was like having. I mean, like being very literal. Having a birthday party, a 75th birthday party, was so much fun. And I mean, I've had party. I've always, decade parties. I've always had birthday parties for myself largely, but if it's 75, it's got like a big ring to it. That's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I had had one small party in my backyard, but this was the first party I'd had in Texas, and it was great because I just invited everybody I knew. There was no. And a friend of mine who's in her 80s said the best thing. She said, "This is like a 60s New York party."
Nice.
And that was, it sounds funny, but I celebrate diversity, because people said it was just like, it was everybody, like young people and old people. It was just like a mishmash of all my relationships in Texas. And there were a lot, people brought a lot of cakes. There were 3 cakes. And so people sang happy birthday to me 3 times, which was really funny. It just really extracted the self consciousness from it.
Yeah.
And then I'd asked a few people to read or perform or play. And so late at the party, a poet said, I thought you want me to read. I said, yes. So she read this like too long poem, which was great. And then after that, people grabbed guitars and sang. And it was kind of amazing. And then even somebody from Chihuahua City, who's, Mexican American, sang this this birthday song that everybody in Mexico knows. And everybody in the room who knew that song sang it. And that was incredible. And people got weepy about that because it was really special,
The lovely idea of community that happens in smaller
Yeah,
towns
yeah,
where there's no exclusivity and you're bringing in a family. It's like a second family in a way. I think that's a really beautiful like way to be in the world.
yeah. No, it was great. It was great. It was chaotic and it was intimate. It was really nice.
Nice. That's so lovely.
Wow.
Well, thank you so much for talking with me. It's
Yeah, it was. I mean,
very honored.
I'm so happy we got to it, and it's been really great and a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you for listening to We Are Art People. You can listen to full episodes on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We are online at www.weareartpeople.com. Sign up to our newsletter for show updates and happenings, and please share with someone who may enjoy listening. See you next time.